Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome once again to the open mic. This is Rich Eisen. I am the host here. And of course, if you are a regular viewer, you know that this is where I talk to writers, editors, agents, folks in the writing game about their work and about the business and all things about writing. So today I'm really thrilled. I have not just a fellow writer, but a friend who has uh, got some really great stuff out there across several platforms, and that's one of the reasons I really want to talk to her today. We're going to focus on some of her previous work and then some of the things she's doing now. So, ladies, without further ado, I guess is how the smart people in this business say it. Erika Mailman, how are you doing this morning, Erika?
I am so feeling good and really happy to talk to you. And thank you for inviting me on the program. Really glad to see you. It's been a
Oh, wow.
while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, damn you, COVID. Anyway, so like I say, I wanted to, you have three of the most interesting books out there over the course of years that I've read, and they're also different. And for those who may not know, we're talking about The Witch's Trinity, A Woman of Ill Fame, and The Murderer's Maid, a Lizzie Borden mystery. Now, the reason I'm naming all those, and if you go look for them, is because they are so different in subject matter, in genre, in style. And I always find that unique because if there's one thing, and I'm going to ask you about this a little bit later, but if there's one thing that the industry tries to do, if you've had success of any kind with one thing, they really try to get you to stay there, right? Because it's about sales. So I'm going to ask you about that in just a bit, but let me just start. I'm a little fascinated by all things witchcraft, ghost, etc. And I love the Witch's Trinity. I don't normally like Gothic, but I really enjoyed that novel, which is very Gothic and somewhat literary in style. I don't generally do literary either because I'm probably not that smart. But you've often said that you are fascinated by witches and witchcraft, to which, like I say, I am as well. What is so interesting about that topic to you?
There's just a general interest in kind of dark things. And where I grew up, my backyard was the woods. And I think woods and kind of dark canopy appeal to a sense of like there's something else there with you that's unseen, that's creeping you out a little bit. And then also from a feminist perspective, who can know about witches and not be fascinated by the stories of these women who are just living their lives and were pulled into these horrific accusations and tortured, killed, all for an ephemeral concept. And when I was writing The Witch's Trinity, you mentioned it's Gothic, and I really wanted to play with the idea that maybe there could be witchcraft, and in fact, my character might be a witch, and she herself is not certain that she isn't because she's from that medieval mindset. She's living in a paradigm where witches do exist and do malevolent things. I tried to strike a balance of like possibly she is a witch, um, and and also balancing the fact that I don't believe in witchcraft. I kind of want to, but it's really a dangerous belief system because it makes people hurt and kill people.
Well, and you touched on it briefly. Over the course of time, one of the things about the book, of course, is your main character. She thinks she may be a witch, and part of it is because she's probably got dementia or something. What we would now recognize as an age-related dementia. Um, and of course, in a time when that mindset where anything could be uh, translated into being something evil, or uh, that's what happens in this book. And uh, I found that really fascinating because we look at things through our modern lens and we go, well, come on, man, how could you think that? But at that in that era and in that mindset, it was probably very believable. And a lot of people, almost always women, let's be honest, paid a very dear price for that. And I thought you did a really fabulous job of that. I mean, maybe expound on that a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rich. Yeah, one of the things that sometimes annoys me when I read historical fiction is characters, living in the past, but having a very modern mindset. Like, what do you mean I can't vote? Of course I can vote. Women should be able to vote. Like, well, there were a lot of people who did say, women should vote, but for many decades, there it just was the way it was. And it was kind of extraordinary women who were petitioning to open that up. So I, in the course of writing that book, was really concerned with making it realistic for the time period and what the characters would think and believe. Um, and I do want to give a shout out to a professor of mine in my undergraduate career, Colby College in Waterville, Maine, Professor Cedric Bryant, a brilliant instructor. We spent an entire month. The, Colby does a Jan plan where you spend a month of intense study on a particular topic. And he taught Gothic fiction one January. And we spent 2 weeks of that month only on the turn of the screw, which was just such an in-depth analysis. To this day, it's still kind of, like I think about some of the things, he brought up that we discussed. And that book is a masterpiece of balancing two potential beliefs that there are ghosts in this home, or that the governess is insane and she's inflicting this really horrific belief onto the children of the household. And there's controversy over whether Henry James intended you to believe both ways, or if it was written as a straight up ghost story. I think actually it was written as a straight up ghost story. But when you apply a kind of psychological analysis to it, there is evidence on either side to support either one. And I just loved that idea that you could structure something in that way. And so I did try for most of the book to kind of balance those two possibilities. But of course, at the end, you come down on one side very definitively.
Right.
But it was really fun and also sobering to work with that structure, that architecture.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm somewhat fascinated by it as well. This is something that's been around forever, right? And now we talk about our modern mindset, and yet, turn on the Discovery Channel and they have 200 ghost shows to watch. Every other YouTube channel is a ghost hunter show. The idea of witchery, witchcraft, ghosts, the demonic, what have you, it seems like such a part of the human DNA. Why do you think that fascination is there? And it's in every culture. I am not aware of a single culture out there that doesn't have something like this. So why do you think that is so ingrained in us and we enjoy these things so much, even when they scare the living crap out of us?
I think the world is bewildering, and you just don't understand why things happen. And, we, as much as there's witchcraft, there's also scapegoating and using a witch as a scapegoat to explain, like, why didn't the crops grow this year? Why won't the rain come? Why are we all starving? And in a lot of ways, my book, The Witch's Trinity, is a book about hunger. Um, I think every culture has a belief in a witchcraft. I keep using the word system. Has belief in witchcraft because it's a way of explaining why things don't go right. Because if you're believing in a benevolent God whose eye is on the sparrow and yet lets your family starve, how do you jostle that and go to sleep at night, not unsettled? Well, you could blame the dark forces of a witch in your town, in your village, somebody who's in touch with the devil, who is doing malevolent things to wreck your life. And
Yeah.
then you can still go on to have a belief in a higher power that is kind and wants good things for you, but is constantly battling the other forces.
Right. Do you think you'll ever write another book on witchcraft, or was that your master opus, and you're going to stay on other things?
No, I'm still really fascinated by witchcraft, and I wrote a YA that I'm currently working on, revising. And I really want to write about my ancestor, who was accused of witchcraft several times in the 1600s in Massachusetts before Salem. There was just a lot of witchcraft in the colonies, and Salem kind of gets all the thunder, but there were, hundreds of witchcraft cases in the American colonies. So I want to write about my ancestor. I'm not sure if I want to handle it in a nonfiction way or novelizing her story. I've actually created a middle grade nonfiction about her. And also, something really fun arose out of all of this, which is that so my ancestor is Mary Bliss Parsons. She was accused of witchcraft in Springfield, Massachusetts, and in Northampton, Massachusetts. And her husband was this like town founder. Like he literally was one of the people who went with the wampum and traded with the Native Americans for the land upon which these settlements were built. So he's famous as a founder. And so every year, except maybe not in pandemic years, in Massachusetts, there's the Parsons family reunion. This couple had, I think, 11, 12 children, and each of them had multiple children. So there's hundreds of descendants. And out here on the West Coast, I'm in California, as are you. There's actually a Parsons family reunion out here. And so I met somebody that I call my cousin, and I think we do both descend from Mary Bliss Parsons and her husband, Cornette Joseph Parsons, but I think maybe we descend from different children of that or grandchildren of that marriage. But he is involved in the theater world. He's a wonderful artist. And so we have kind of started collaborating on maybe a graphic novel about Mary Bliss Parsons. And he's done some drawings already that were just wonderful. And I'm really excited once the pandemic kind of clears out and everybody's vaccinated, that he and I can return to working on that.
Well, I would look forward to that. Great anticipation. Like I say, I noted all of your three, and you've written more than this, but the three novels that I mentioned earlier, they're so different because I really liked A Woman of Ill Fame, and your protagonist is as a gold rush era prostitute in San Francisco, and The Murderer's Maid, which is your most current novel, which of course is based on the Lizzie Borden case, which is not, I almost said legend, it's not a legend, it's a real case, which of course she was tried and found innocent of murdering her parents. The former has a lot of humor in it. I mean, there's still a murder and very serious part of the story, but your protagonist has a great sense of humor, which you showcase a lot. Not so much in Lizzie Borden. That's much more of a straight mystery, but also it has a modern thread that runs through it too. Again, all very, very different things, which I like because it's a refusal to be pigeonholed. So how much of that is intentional, I guess, because you've always come across him as a person who writes stories that you're interested in, as opposed to ones somebody may tell you should do. So maybe you just give me a brief background on how you came to write those stories.
That is a really perceptive question. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, they are really disparate, and the way that you're describing them, they're really different from each other. But for me, I feel like they're all kind of similar because they're stories about strong women who were battling against the restrictions of the time period in which they lived. It's funny, I hadn't really thought about the fact that the Woman of Ill Fame is funny, and the other two are really serious. I just hadn't really thought about that before. And maybe Woman of Ill Fame is my favorite of my books because of that. The horrible things happen. There's like a serial killer plot. And yet my character's, always upbeat and funny and exuberant. But yeah, for me, there's the thread of women who I would love to meet in the current day and see what they would be doing, but they're plunged into this past where their outcome is kind of not predisposed for them, predestined for them, maybe just because of being a woman in that era.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
that's one of the things I think, and again, in our modern mindset, we go, oh, so your hero's a prostitute, but and you really do weave this through the story. For somebody in her circumstances, there wasn't a lot of options. I mean, it was really more of telling of how messed up society was and how patriarchal our society was in that time frame, that you're either somebody's wife or
Somebody's daughter, somebody's
yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe you're somebody's daughter who can provide you means where you still live at home and you have that quote unquote respectability or what have you. But if heaven forbid you have to be out on your own, you can't work, you can't own a business, you can't vote, there's so many things you
you
cannot
can't
do.
own
And if you
property. I
can't
mean,
can't
that's
own
horrific.
can't do much of
You can't have
anything.
a bank account. You can't own property. Yeah, women were really at loose ends if they didn't have a kinsman of some variety, husband or blood related, to protect them and kind of make a place for them in the world.
And yet
Uh,
she accepts this uh, uh, this line of work with a plan, and never deviates from that plan. And that's the thing, even with all the other stuff going around her, and she somehow keeps a sense of humor. I mean, I found her to be an absolutely fascinating heroine. And so I mean, I've loved all your books, but I really did like that book quite a lot, because I think, again, you have to release your modern mindset a little bit. But I don't want to cut you off from talking about Lizzie Borden too, because that's a subject, that's a story, that's a character that is never going to go away, I don't think. And
right.
it's 100 years later, and we're still fascinated with that.
Yeah, and recently the home where the murders took place, which had been operating as a bed and breakfast that I actually spent the night at in my character's attic bedroom, that just recently sold over the pandemic summer for millions of dollars. I wish I could remember the amount off the top of my head. I don't, but yeah, it's a viable business. People are spending their honeymoon staying in this murder house. Um, if I could just circle back really quickly for a moment to Woman of Ill Fame. Um, Years ago, I belonged to a writers group in San Francisco, and a woman in the group said to me, Erika, everything you write has to do with religion and spirituality. And I was like, oh, really? My prostitute book is about religion and spirituality. And she's like, yeah, it is. And when I took a step back and looked at it from that perspective, I realized it kind of is, because Nora, the main character, she is very deeply moral. It's just that her morality is really different from the mainstream morality. Um, and I think in The Murderer's Maid, my character really struggles with what's the right thing to do and what to do with information you might have. And in The Witch's Trinity, clearly that's really about religion and does prayer work, and is God operating to help or not. So that was kind of an interesting lens for me to look at my work through, from that kind of offhand comment from a friend. Um, yeah, it's I think we all, when we write, and you will probably think this about yourself as well, Rich, we're all kind of like grappling with things that we think about the world that arise out of our childhoods, what
Absolutely.
we lived through, how we
Absolutely.
tackled it or didn't tackle it, and that shows up in our fiction.
Absolutely. Well, it shows up in your work a lot also, because you're also a freelance journalist. And I've read a lot of your pieces, and for those who maybe haven't, I mean, you're regularly in the Washington Post and many other major publications. But I'm thinking about, you did a really thoughtful, reflective piece on the families of many of the victims from the Jonestown massacre from God, when I was a young man back in the late 1970s when that happened. And it was in Rolling Stone. If anyone wants to go look it up, but that was really a very reflective and very mesmerizing piece. And I thought it really took a deft hand to remember, because we, again, when events like that are so historic, and the magnitude of that, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men, women, and children who commit suicide. We have a United States congressman who's murdered. His assistant gets shot many times and then becomes a congresswoman, has been in office for years. That becomes more of the story, and you forget that there were hundreds of families left behind too. And so I thought that was a really great piece. What what do you take into something like that when you take on a story like that? Because that's almost like a novel, right? You have to have that same mindset to some extent, I think. You tell me.
Yeah, that again, you're so perceptive. All these things you're saying, I'm like, yeah, that's really, I want to think about that some more. It's almost like writing a novel. It is, because you're assembling the characters and you're doing interviews with people. And, for this story, I spoke with people whose loved ones died in really a horrific way. And we refer to Jonestown as a mass suicide, but um, the children didn't commit suicide and did not want to. And many people, this is kind of like the less talked about aspect of Jonestown. Many of those bodies had syringe marks in their backs. Like, you don't do that to yourself. You're supposed to be drinking this flavor aid. So I think it was a combination. Oh, and also, armed men with guns there telling you to do it. So not necessarily a mass suicide. So yeah, I am on the phone, talking with these distraught families who have had to come to peace with what happened. Um, for me, the story arose out of learning about the cemetery in Oakland, California, where all of these, I think there were 982 people um, who died in Guyana and were flown back to the United States, but to the East Coast, which is really strange. They were flown into Delaware. But most of the People's Temple members were Californians and West Coast people. And so, and often people of not wealthy means, right, to fly to the East Coast, fetch their family members, often, not just one or two, but entire families, and bring the bodies back for burial. And so at some point I think about half got claimed and half were unclaimed. And so this was a problem. What do you do with these bodies? And the cemetery owner in Oakland said, I will take on that task. I will take these bodies, which was actually a brave thing for him to do, because at the time it was really volatile. People were scared that he might get attacked by still what's the word, fervent People's Temple members. And he's like, I'll take that risk. I'll take these people. And I interviewed him, and he had this incredible system that he had learned from a trade journal article, because fairly recently, is it called Tenerife or Tenerife? That airline disaster, the cemetery that took those bodies had figured out a way of stacking them in rows. And so he followed that format and was able to lay all these people to rest. And I just thought, like, that's a fascinating story that everybody knows about Jonestown, and everybody knows about, don't drink the Kool-Aid, which I will take this moment to beg people, please don't use that. It's not funny.
Yeah.
But nobody knows where those people are today. They're not in the jungle in Guyana. They're here in Oakland, California, or in various family burials if they were claimed by their family.
Yeah. Well, I really commend you on the, I think, I'm not sure people can appreciate what a deft touch it takes to write things like that, because you have to have great empathy for the circumstances and the people you're talking to, but you can never forget that you cannot get drawn into it on too deep of an emotional level for a number of reasons. One, you can't do the story correctly when you're too into it. And of course, for those who don't know, I'm a reporter too. But
Good point.
you can't get drawn into it and let it overtake your journalistic sensibilities, number one, responsibilities, but also because you have to be fair to the whole story. You can't take on 900 and all 1,000 people's deaths. I mean, you have kids, you have a family. You can't let that stuff, overwhelm you. So I thought it was a really deft touch on a very difficult subject. And it leads me to the next question, which is you're also a teacher. You teach writing to, and you've taught at the college level, and you teach individual courses online. And I don't want to spend too much time there, but I do want to ask you, because I think everybody thinks they're a writer, and everybody thinks they can do these things. And let's just be really honest, a lot of people can't. and then a lot of it, I think everybody can, but not everybody's willing to do the work. And I think that's the big difference. Everybody can, but they're not always willing to do the work. And when you're in your position, you see a lot of those folks. So what is maybe the best part of trying to teach people these skills, and what's the worst part?
Okay. I love thinking about story structure and architecture, and that idea of like it starts here, it rises, it rises, it rises, it has an arc, and it has a definitive ending. And so right now I'm teaching novel writers through Maelstrom Writing Clinic, which is a pun on my last name, Mailman. And it's a 10-week online class, and each week the students can post 6 double-spaced pages, which isn't much. It's enough to get a good chunk out there. And what I love about it is diving in, not with a scalpel, but with a sense of like, I can help you make this better. And I like looking at, even though it's like I'm getting 10 small chunks, I'm starting to see like the infrastructure. And in the beginning weeks, if people choose instead, they can show an outline for their 6 pages. And that's really fun for me to kind of look at the skeleton of the story and hopefully try to guide it a little bit before people invest a lot of time in writing it. I won't go into it too much, but the first novel I ever wrote, I spent 8 years on, and I kept rewriting it and retweaking it and rethinking it. And the second book
I can
wrote
relate.
What?
I can relate.
Can you relate? Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. And the second book was Woman of Ill Fame. I was unemployed right after September 11th. I lost a teaching job I had. And so I just sat down in a month and like belted out a really rough draft, and a very short draft, I should say. It was only novella length at that point. But it was so freeing to be like, okay, if I focus on plot and outline it first and then write it, I can make sure that I've got something that's story worthy, before I invest the time. So I've found that I do better with outlining. I know not everybody does, and lots of people don't follow that idea. But for me, the way my mind works, I want to outline first and figure it out, and then write. And so I hope to convey a little bit of that to students. I always like try to persuade them to do the outline. And yeah, I just enjoy diving into other people's work and seeing what I can do to help.
That's great. Well, we're short on time, so I'm gonna cut to the end here, and I like to end as I always say, on what I hope is a fun question, what I mean to be a fun question. Whether it's fun for you, you'll determine yourself, I guess. But I mean for it to be a fun question. I always say, what if I could put you together? Let's just say I had the magic power of witchcraft to put you together with any one of the following 3 people for a conversation, maybe an adult beverage, whatever would grease the wheels to chat with folks at great length. And I'll give you your 3 options, and you tell me who you would choose. Since we're on the theme of witchcraft, I'll give you Elizabeth Montgomery, my favorite witch from my youth, who was, of course, from the TV show Bewitched. Um, the famous British clairvoyant Mother Shipton, or the very infamous German archbishop and witch hunter Johann von Schonenberg. And if you don't know about him, look him up sometime. I'll leave it at that. Those are your options. Who would you choose if I gave you those options?
Okay, so I feel like from a responsibility to the world angle, I should probably choose the Johann character or personage so that I could sit him down and like really read him the riot act and stop him from doing the things he's about to do. But I would really prefer, just for the fun of it, to be with Elizabeth Montgomery because I loved watching Bewitched, and she plays Lizzie Borden in probably the best film version of the story. Yeah, it was like a made for TV movie that came out, I think, in the 80s. And it's a really good depiction of the story. It's very true to it. And like the floor plan of the house looks like the house. And she also was related distantly to Lizzie Borden. Did you know that?
I did not know that. No.
And Kenny, you picked her because she really, yeah. So
I know. I had no clue.
Yeah.
No, it was the witch thing. No, yeah, well, that's awesome. Yeah, I loved Elizabeth Montgomery. Again, I loved Bewitched as a kid and anything. I've seen her in other things, but never seen the Lizzie Borden movie. So maybe I'll have to find out how to get my hands on that. That would be great. Well, Erika,
we
as
learn how
always,
to wiggle our noses so we can do our magic.
I know that's a magic trick unto itself. You know, I don't know. Maybe they did some camera stuff. I don't know, but I've always heard she's a very nice person too, or was a very nice person. Unfortunately, she died way too young. But anyway, Erika, as always, fabulous. It's nice to see you again. I would look forward to a time when we can all see each other in person again. It's I live even farther away now than I did before, but who knows? We'll figure it out at some point. For those of everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed it as well. I'm going to make a point of putting the contact for Erika's classes in down below. So check that out, because I think you could do a lot worse than learning something about writing novels from Erika. I mean that in the best possible way. I think Erika's a fabulous teacher, and I think if you're interested in doing this, do yourself a favor and learn how to do it right. And don't spend 8 years or 10 years or your entire life writing one story like I think I'm going to do. Maybe I should have taken your class and I'd already be, I'd be on multiple books now. Anyway, Erika, thank you.
It is always so good to talk to you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you today and our friendship in general. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already, please, I mentioned her books, The Witch's Trinity, A Woman of Ill Fame, and The Murderer's Maid, a Lizzie Borden mystery. They're all available wherever you find books or online. I highly recommend all of them. In fact, you should do that. Go buy all of them and then sit down and read all of them. There you go. All right. Thank you again. See you next time on The Open Mic.